All right. Well, if you will open up your to the book of Proverbs, chapter 15. Proverbs, chapter 15. And while you're finding your place there, do we have any praise or prayer requests before we get started? Sir? Oh, yeah. All right. Any praise? Yes, ma'am. On Tuesday, we go for the next ultrasound, so we'll find out if it's going to be a baby boy or baby girl. So I'm hoping for girl, and it's because the boys' bedroom has two, our bedroom has two. Hers is the only one with a single occupancy right now, so it would be much advantageous if this was a girl. So that's what I'm praying for. But whatever it is, but I don't know where we're going to stick another boy, so we'll find out on Tuesday. So for that. Any other praise or prayer requests?
My sister Liana and husband, they have financial problems.
Financial problems. You said Leanna?
Yeah.
Where do they live?
Liana?
Oh, you said Piliana. I thought you said Leanna. I'm sorry. I was thinking, I haven't heard that name before. All right. Well, if there's no other praise or prayer requests, then let's go and let's get started. Lord, we do thank you this morning for the beautiful day you've given us. Thank you for the fact that we were all able to get up and find our way here, Lord, to worship you amongst fellow believers in this building. Lord, I do pray that you would, Lord, be with Piliana and her husband, Lord, as they're having a struggle with finances, Lord, and you know that can be an extremely stressful thing. Lord, there's a lot of things you can deal with, but health and money are ones that can really drag you down spiritually. Lord, I pray that you would have your hand on what they're doing there, Lord, and that you'd bless it. I pray that you'd help them to remain strong as a couple, Lord, and that they would be able to find their way through the issues. Lord, I pray that you would be with Miss Wanda as she's got an upcoming test on results would come back positive, Lord, and if nothing else, Lord, that they'd at least have a direction as to how to handle the issues she's been dealing with lately. Lord, I pray that you'd also be with us as we go on Tuesday to find out the gender of the baby. I pray that you'd Lord, help them to find that the baby's still in good health and that everything's tracking just fine. Lord, I pray, thank you for the time again we have to be here. I pray that you'd use me as I teach, Lord, in your name pray. Amen. All right, Proverbs chapter 15, we're going to read verses 1 through 19 to start with, but we are going to cover the whole chapter this morning. Proverbs 15, verse 1, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. A wholesome tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness therein is a breach in the spirit. A fool despiseth his father's instruction, but he that regardeth reproof is prudent. In the house is much treasure, but in the revenues of the wicked is trouble. The lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the foolish doeth not so. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. The way of the wicked is an abomination unto the Lord, but he loveth him that followeth after righteousness. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. Hell and destruction are before the Lord. How much more then the hearts of the children of men? A scorner loveth not one that reproveth him, neither will he go unto the wise. A merry heart maketh a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of the heart the spirit is broken. The heart of him that hath understanding seeketh the mouth of fools, feedeth on foolishness. All the days of the afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry heart hath a continual feast. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. Better is a dinner of herbs where love is than a stalled ox and hatred therewith. A wrathful man stirreth up strife, but he that is slow to anger appeaseth strife. The way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain. This morning we're going to be looking at the comparison of the righteous to the wicked. And of course we know most of the book of Proverbs is life sayings, and there's a good portion of that deal with that exact comparison. Wise, the righteous to the wicked. But here specifically in this chapter, Solomon picks up dealing with more life observations about people and life in general. In this chapter, he outlines some of the differences between the righteous and the wicked. And to make these differences recognizable, he gives a series of contrasts. You know, when we're trying to explain how much we enjoy today, some of the times it's easy to do that when you can compare it to a previous day. You say, man, Monday was such a terrible day. It was so hard. You know, everything seemed to be against me. Then Tuesday, I'll tell you, Tuesday was a great day. Woke up feeling good. I wasn't feeling more. Why? Because it is made even better when you can remember what a not good day was like. You know, all of us have had really bad days. Really bad days, although we don't enjoy them, they tend to lighten up even more the days that we had that are good, because we think, I know what it's like. It could be worse. You know, that's why you talk to someone going through cancer. That day, they're feeling that good, but you can ask them, well, today's a good day. Why is it today a good day? Because I've seen some bad ones. You know, like when you still have cancer, but today's a good day. I remember a friend of mine that his wife did finally pass of fighting with cancer. She was that way. Every day she could get up and do what she needed to. She said it's a good day. She just always had a good attitude about her. But you know, as you compare, that's exactly what he's doing here. He's putting the comparison of the righteous to the wicked, so that you can see how they compare in a series of contrast here. John Phillips, commenting on the book of Proverbs chapter 15, he said, a good man is placed alongside a bad one. A worthy act is enhanced by being placed alongside a base one. Solomon knew that a flashing diamond seems more lustrous when it is displayed on a black velvet background. And that's exactly what Solomon's doing for his son. Now this again was written for the intention of his son's admonition, but it's obviously good for our instruction of the Lord here. So as he talks, he's laying out this diamond before us of what it means to walk in a righteous path, and he's out against the evil black background so that you can see the difference between what the two lives get you. Because if you look in the world, they're going to portray that living for yourself, living for sin, living for your life is a grand thing. That's exactly what's happened, and it's became a firestorm of controversy over the Bruce Jenner thing. And you know, the world puts it up and broadcasts how great it is and how proud they are of this person making this choice. But as Solomon would speak about it, he'd say, no, that was wicked. Your choices there are wicked. And he lays out the righteous path in comparison. The world lifts up wicked and says it's good. But Solomon here, through the wisdom of God, lays out the truth so that you can see what one is really which. You know, it's been said before that when they teach someone how to identify a false counterfeit dollar, they don't do it by teaching them all the techniques of the counterfeiter and all the ones they take. They teach them to know the real thing. And if you know the real thing, then when you see something that doesn't look like it, you know it's not real. So the same thing with what he's doing here. He's teaching us what a real Christian, what a real wise, righteous person lives like, so that when you see someone who doesn't, you know that's not it. So as he transitions, we're going to examine these comparisons and see which category our friends, our family, and even where God would classify us. So as we look here, first of all, we see in verses 1 through 7, the words of the wicked. The words of the wicked. That brings us to life principle number 51. Words can heal or words can kill. And they truly can. There's been many a person that by the acts and the words of someone, their thought process, their well-being, destroyed everything about them. But then you can have someone that can come and say, I mean, I think all of us have worked in a company where we worked with other people, and you had some people that were nice and some people that were not so nice. You could go into the office and you walk in the door and you meet the person that's standing in the office, and that person, as soon as you step in, just lets you know how bad they think you are, and they just give you a rotten attitude. You walk out of their office, and by the time you walked out of their office, you're in just a terrible mood. Somebody sees your face downtrodden, just looking upset, and they say, "What's wrong?" Hey, it's a great day. You're at work today. You made it in, didn't you? You're healthy. Good to see you. And then you walk out of their office feeling better. Words have a lot of power. Words have the power to kill, and words have the power to make someone enjoy their day even more. So words can heal, words can kill. An old childhood saying says, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words hurt me." And that's not true. You go online, do some research. The number 3 cause of death in teenagers is suicide. Number 3. It's not a wide difference between 1, 2, and 3. But the number 3 cause is suicide. At their age, what you're sitting there thinking, man, your whole life's in front of you. You've got all these possibilities that make you want to give up. If you look at most of them now, they have blogs, the stuff where they've recorded their thoughts. And if you look at them, most of them will attribute it back to the way people have treated them and talked to them. Regardless of how they should have handled it, words had the power to kill. People that said those things killed them one word at a time. To the point where they didn't feel like it was worth continuing on. Word a whole lot worse than sticks and stones. You can throw a stick at me, hit me upside the head, and make my head bleed. It's going to grow. It'll heal. It's fine. But you can say something hurtful about me that 30 years later I can hide my heart and just hold on. If we were being honest with ourselves, we can still remember how we felt when someone close to us or someone that we thought was important said something mean or hurtful to us. And it could have been 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and you could still remember it. For something that was said to me when I was 11 years old. So, given I know I'm not as old as here, but for me that's a long time ago. I'm fixing to turn 32, so you're talking 20, 21 years ago. That person, what they said and how it hurt. Just as if it was today, I can put myself right back in that position and remember it. Words have power. And it's like a poured out in the dirt. It's gone. You can't get it back. As he talks about this, he said the words of the wicked, they use words that hurt. But a wise person, he said in verses 1 through 2, does not use their words this way. In fact, he says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. Then in verse 2, the tongue of the wise useth knowledge aright. A wise person is the one that sees the situation about to explode, come up, and they're the one that they calm the situation with what they say. They're the one that steps in the middle and says, guys, we'll bring down the level here, calm it away from each other and come back. Use a soft answer, because a soft answer turns away wrath. It's hard for you to get into a yelling and screaming match with a person that just keeps saying, I'm sorry. Let's talk about it. I'm sorry. Because yelling requires 2 people. You can't feed anger off of someone being nice. Because half the time an arguing person says something they don't like, which makes them mad, something this person doesn't like. Feeding back and forth, but he said a wise person, you can't keep going back and forth in an argument if one person's not willing. Ever noticed that before? It takes 2 people to argue. Either that or a crazy person with multiple. Beyond that person, you have to have 2 people involved to have an argument. So he said that is tactful. They're thoughtful in the things they do and the way they talk. In fact, in the book of James, in James chapter 3 and verses 1 through 3, James kind of talks about this. Said, "My brethren, be not many masters, knowing that we shall receive the greater condemnation. Many things we offend all. If any man offend not in word, the same is a perfect man, and able to also to bridle the whole body. Oh, we put bits in the horses' mouths, that they may obey us, and we turn about. Behold also the ships, which though they be so driven by fierce, turned about with a very small helm, whithersoever the governor listeth. Even so the tongue is and boasteth great. Behold, how great a matter fire kindleth." He said in verse 13, "Man endued with knowledge among you, let him show out of good conversation his works with meekness." He talks about the tongue in chapter 3. And his basic thought was, if you can learn to control your tongue, you become a great man, a great woman. To be able to bridle the tongue, you have controlled a great and dangerous weapon. We talk about people that carry a weapon. Everyone carries a concealed weapon, because there's been many people that have used it to cause much greater destruction than any single bullet could ever do. A single bullet and kill somebody, but you can say something that causes destruction of. Our president, with the power of his tongue, has the power to take life very, very easily. Tongue, but we can do the way we treat people. In fact, it's been recommended that we should operate under 3 rules of speech. 1, speak, we should ask ourselves, is it the truth? According to the Bible's definition, God hates. He hates the tongue. He hates the one who lies. You go back to the book of throughout it, tell you that He hates the tongue of the liar. He hates, and He hates the one who does it. So, is it truth? Secondly, is it necessary? There are things that are true, but they're necessary. I could see somebody look and walk, they dressed 2 different color socks. Now, is it true that they're wearing 2 different color socks? Sure. But are that would really embarrass them? If they are, and you bring it out in front of a bunch of other people to make fun of them, really necessary. It was true, but it wasn't necessary. Thirdly, is it kind and loving? So when we speak, we should ask ourselves, is it truth? Is it necessary? And is it kind and loving? And if we'll determine what we say by those, we'll probably find ourselves in a whole lot less trouble with our mouth. Because is it truth? Is it necessary? And is it kind and loving? Instead, doesn't use their tongue this way. They're not tactful, thoughtful. They're hateful, they're harmful, and they're hurtful. We see they're hateful in verse 1, the second part, but grievous words stir up anger. They're a person that stirs among other people. They enjoy keeping the pot turned and the pot stewing. He said they're harmful in verse 2, but the mouth of fools poureth out foolishness. You can almost cascading fountain, just spewing everywhere they go onto other people. But they're also hurtful in verse 4. He said, "Business therein is a breach in the spirit." He said there's an open wall, there's a hole, there's no protection for them. The thing, they don't care who they hurt. The Lord, He noticed every word. Chapter 12:36, He says, "But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give of in the day of judgment." It really is kind of scary to think that every one of our words is for. The fool's life slogan is this: "I always speak my mind." You ever heard anyone say that before? I just speak my mind. Well, I don't realize they don't have a whole lot to talk about. On top of that, even worse so, what's on their mind isn't necessary to be shared with everybody. A fool just goes about speaking his mind. All they do is reveal the emptiness therein. Because Life 52 tells us that our mouth reveals our heart. He said that in verse, "The lips of the wise disperse knowledge, but the heart of the fool doeth not so." So, we understand the fact that our heart is revealed by our true intention. We've said it before, but someone says something of a disagreement, and later on they want to come, I'm sorry, I didn't really mean that. No, you did. That was because you were so angry, your anger blinded you to the consequences of what you were going to say, and you went ahead and blurted out what you've been saying all along. And now you feel sorry because it was said, but it's too late. Jesus told us that every idle word would be judged and would be taken account of in the day of judgment. 36. Of what does the word idle really mean? The word idle, as he talks about, useless, barren, or just idle. It's referring to those words that have no way. It's that conversation we had Monday morning that was just worthless. There was no point in having it. It served no benefit to either you or the other person. You were tell a joke to make somebody laugh, and it had no purpose to it whatsoever. He said the idle are ones that were, with no merit. They're useless. It's studies that they say uses an approximate 31,500 words a day. Now, there's been previous studies that said men and women. I don't really know how much is that true, because I talk as much as anybody else. So I don't know how people that don't talk a lot. I know Brother Ham probably uses a whole lot less words than I do every day. But on general, 31,500 words an average per person a day. Estimated that from the first good morning to the night, the average person engages in 30 conversations a day. Each day, their words could make the equivalent of more than 100 books a year, 200 pages each. And all that's being recorded. You imagine going up and having to look through the library of Dan Slavy? There's some books I would read, because I things I wish I hadn't. I know I've said things I regret. Now, we know as a Christian that God is not going to stand in judgment of determining our place in hell, because we're saved. We're not going to hell. We've all sinned. We've all come short of God, but the gift of God is eternal. So He's forgiven us. But at the same time, those things that we say are still there. They're still recorded, every idle word. So as we talk, we have to be very careful to realize that there is nothing we say that's not recorded. You always worry about Big Brother tapping your phone and recording you. Guess what? Big Brother's been here since the beginning. God's been recording everything. There's nothing you've ever said that's been in. How wisely are we using our words? One writer points out that the words of an unbeliever to everything that is idle. Nothing they can do can have any merit before God. And we know that because of the book of Proverbs in chapter 15, verse 8, the sacrifice of the abomination unto the Lord. But the prayer of the upright is His delight. He said, when they pray, delight. If you're not, nothing. He said, in fact, their sacrifice, they thousands upon thousands, millions of dollars to charity. It doesn't matter. Doesn't do any good. In fact, it not only doesn't do any good, but it's an abomination. Now, you realize that if Bill, who does not give one care for the things of God, was to walk into our church, I tell you what, I've got to write off a charitable tax contribution. I'm going to write y'all a check for $1 million. You realize that although we would be very happy to take it, and we'd be glad to write him out his charitable contribution statement, if he thinks that that's one bit of pleasure with God, he said it's an abomination. Now, would we take it? I think we would. The fact that the Bible talks about in another section about the unsaved, righteous, pouring blessings into the bosom of the saved. So I couldn't take it, but at the same time, he needs. If he's thinking that it gains a merit, not only is it not going to do you, it makes me even more mad that you thought you could buy me. It's like a police officer trying to get bribed. Someone bribing him, saying no. Not only was I before going to be lenient on you, now I'm going to be twice as hard, because that's the case here. It's exactly what God's saying. So we have to ask ourselves, are our words idle? Do they have any purpose? Are they being used well? Because a person's words are also reflections of condition. They show who we really are. They show what we like. They reveal our heart. In fact, in Matthew chapter 12, verse 37, I'm going to go there real quick. In Matthew 7, he said this, by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. He said, you are your own judge, and the things you say will be the ones that will either justify you before God, that will condemn you before Him. So as we look here, and as he's doing the comparison, we saw first of all the words of the wicked. When we're doing our classification of whether we live like the righteous or the wicked, we saw the words and how they define us by what we say. We see also the ways of the works of the wicked. So we saw the words of the wicked, but we see the works of the wicked in verses 8 through 12. We see that the wise has God loved. Verse 8 and 9. He said in verse 8 and 9, the sacrifice is abomination unto the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is His delight. The way of the wicked is abomination unto the Lord, but He loveth him that followeth after righteousness. So God loves the wise prayer, the wise person's pursuit. But in comparison, He hates the fool, and He hates the fool. And the opposite of verse 8, the sacrifice of the wicked is the Lord. Verse 9, the way of the wicked is of the Lord. Their life, their way makes Him disgusted. You know, again, I understand the fact that it's become a hot topic. And y'all remember Greg Law, he's post sites and about the Bruce Jenner situation. And so far, Pastor said when he looked at it this morning, it was on its way to 1 million views, and he only posted. And he has, of course, received negative comments. He's received good comments, but plenty of negative comments. And the way of the wicked, it's an abomination unto him. He said they live in a way which the person say that's good. If that makes him happy, because if you're accepting of his happiness, you have to be accepting of mine in the way. I'm going to judge this person. If I judge them, I'm in danger of being judged. And you know what? But at the same time, what he said he went through and said, can a leper change his spots? And sat there and went through and gave it Bible examples of why it's he's done. The world calls it an abomination way, essentially. He said that a fool is an abomination to God because he will not be instructed, as he willfully choose. What does he mean by he will not be instructed? In verses 10 and 12, he said, correction is grievous that forsaketh the way. He said it grieves their heart to be corrected. Verse 12, a scorner loveth not one that reproveth him. He said, they can't stand being instructed. They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to be told they're wrong. You ever realize that when you have a conversation with a person that doesn't want truth will never get in the way of their decision? They won't be bothered. Don't throw truth at me because I'll choose not to believe it. They're the kind of person that's walking towards a wall and you try to warn them the wall's in front of them. They close their eyes and say, nope, I don't see it. Soon enough, they're going to run right into that wall. When they do, he'll say, you hit the wall. Say, no, I didn't. You hit me. You ever dealt with people like that? You're like, no, I didn't. You're like, no, I know you hit me. How do you know? I had my eyes shut. You must have done it. You sit there and think about these people that want to refute the truths of God. They nope, there's not a wall there. And when they do, it's your fault and you tripped them. You know, that's the way they live. They can't stand to be corrected. They won't stand in their way. He said that also that they willfully choose hell in verses 10 and 11. He said in verse 10, he said, correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. And destruction are before the Lord. How much more than the hearts of the He said it's in their heart to know that there's something coming. You know, there's people that'll say, you just go in the dirt. But even they have something in the back of their heart that says they know there's more to life than just this. You think about the amazing way this world operates. Some of the times we get so careless in the things, we forget about the true miracle of life, the miracle of what's around. You can take this tiny little tiny little seed, cover it up and spray some water on it, and soon you'll have watermelons growing in your backyard. Take this little seed and plant it in the dirt and wait a couple weeks, and all of a sudden you've got tomato plants growing, peach tree, whatever it may be, the stuff that you're grown. You can count on the fact that the sun's going to rise, and when it rises, it's going to heat the earth for just long to get you warm, but it's not going to cook you. Then it's going to go to the planet to cool enough so that the sun has time to come back around again. Whereas if you stayed in the presence of the sun, one side of the earth would be 300 degrees and the other side of the earth would be negative 100, negative 200 degrees. But just enough so that you'd get warm during the day and cooler during the night. The amazingness to the way this world was created. I still go back and look at, as they do the comparison of saying how the way that we were created was by small changes throughout time that benefited our and until we went from tadpoles to monkeys, from monkeys to people. You look at that example and say that's great and all, that you can't find that in nature. I still love using the example of the giraffe. The giraffe stands so tall that if the giraffe were to drop down to the ground to eat something, his pressure is so high and is so hard that he would have an aneurysm, because as he drops down, that blood pressure would double his head down, and it would cause his brain to just pretty much blow out and he'd die. But then somehow managed to survive going down. When he came back, his blood pressure would drop because of the change in the position of his head, and he would have a time where his brain would be starved for blood for a few moments until the blood could catch back. And through doing it over and over again, he would either have or become mentally retarded because his brain would cease to function correctly because he would keep going through periods of no oxygen. In either case, the giraffe would not continue. But God made the base of its neck so that when he bends down, the flap closes so that the pressure inside of his head. But he also made a sponge at the bottom of his brain that soaks up blood. So as his head back up, the brain can suck that sponge so that it has enough to until the blood pressure can settle out and flap and send it back into the brain. It's amazing, but yet the atheist of this world would say that was just a lucky happen chance. No, I don't see that as being luck, because without that flap, you would never see a single giraffe in your life. They wouldn't exist because they can't things. So we see the way, we see the words of the wicked, we see the works of the wicked. Now we're going to see the way of the wicked. In verses 13 through 18, we see the ways of the wicked. He shows principle number 53, your attitude determines your altitude. Now that's something you'll hear if you go to one of these motivational speeches, but it's true. Wake up with a bad attitude, your day is going to go bad. It really doesn't matter what happens. Something will happen negative. People being that way, and to some extent fight that can see the dark lining on any silver cloud. I have to know that, and that's just who I am. I understand that, and as long as you understand it, you have a way to fix it. But your attitude will determine your outcome. In these verses, Solomon compares the differences in the wicked. First of all, they're weighted by their temperament. Their temperament, verses 13 to 15, we see that they have either the way of song or sorrow in their life. In verse 13, a merry heart maketh a cheer, but by sorrow of the heart broken. So that's not to say that they never get sad, but it's to say they don't live a life of sadness. Verse 13, merry heart maketh a cheerful, a happy heart about their circumstances, because they understand that they can't live that life of the roller coaster of emotions, because it's a terrible way to live. And an example of that was, you can think of Haman's joy as he realized that as he thought that he was about to become an important man in the kingdom, and quickly turning to sorrow as he realizes that the king has been told his evil plan is now going to hang him on the very gallows to kill Mordecai on. He said that their temperament is that they either live a life of song or a life of sorrow, a life of seeking or a life of scoffing. In verse 14, the heart of him that hath understanding seeketh knowledge, but the mouth of fools feedeth on foolishness. The comparison between Solomon and his son Rehoboam. Solomon was a man who sought after wisdom. He said he hath understanding and seek. That lived like the second half. He feedeth on foolishness. When his dad died, he became the king. Instead of going to the wise sayers and the wise speakers so that his dad had been listening to, he goes to his foolish buddies and says, "What should I do?" And they say, "Man, lay it down hard. Let them know the rules and the who's." He said that they either live a life of seeking or a life of scoffing. They either live a life of or a life of sighing. In verse 15, all afflicted are evil, but he that is of a merry hath a continual. Both of these people experienced the same day. He didn't say that verse 15, he didn't say all the days of the evil are afflicted. There's a difference. He said all the days of the afflicted are evil. To think that their day is an affliction to them, they think they're all evil. The other person, you think of Job. Job, before the devil had taken everything from him, a continual feast every great day. Now, did Job have high and low days? Sure. Did he have days he argued with his wife? Absolutely. Did he have days where his sons or his daughters did him upset? Absolutely. Did he have days where his business? Yes. So Job knew what it was like days and bad. But when he lost his household, lost all of his business, he went from singing to sighing. Both days were the same. But the difference was the circumstances changed the way he felt about the day. Evil. He said, but a Christian ought to be so they live through a day that's right, come out on the other side singing God's praises. And that's not easy to do. It's an easy thing, but it's a whole lot different to do. But as he explained that they live a life of either singing or sighing. So we saw, first of all, that the way is that they either live a life of song, singing or scoffing, singing or sighing. They also, as we look at we see that they'll have trouble because of the wrong ambitions. In verses 16 through 17, he said, "With the fear of the great treasure and trouble there, better is a dinner of herbs where love is than and hatred." Think of the story. It's a man who desired gold, wanted every treasure he could have. So he was given a gift that he could turn as he asked for, the ones he loved anymore. He couldn't touch anyone. He couldn't show someone how much he cared. He could no longer be intimate with his wife. Why? Because if he even hugged her, he would turn her. It sounds like a great gift to be able to turn anything to gold you touch, but it's not such a great gift when you touch everything. Putting on your shoes and they turn to hardened gold. You got to have someone else for you. But if they accidentally they turn, he was a man that his greed gave him the wrong ambition and ended up causing destruction in his life. We see their trouble is that they have ambitions. That they also have wrathful anger in verse 18. A wrathful man stirreth up strife, slow to anger appeaseth. An early verse in chapter 10, verse 12 tells us that those are people who stir it up, that they're hateful. In fact, in Proverbs chapter 10, verse 12, he said that he stirreth up strifes, or it covereth all sins. So he said the person that likes to stir up problems among people, it's because they're a hating person. They're full of hatred in their heart. We see that they also have wasteful apathy in verse 19. The way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain. They're lazy. They're wasteful in their life because they don't want to work. In chapter 26, 13 through 15, he talks about that idea. Verse 13. The slothful man saith, there is a lion in the way. A lion is in the streets. As the door turneth upon his hinges, slothful upon his bed. The slothful hand in his bosom, it grieveth him to bring it again to his mouth. He said they're lazy. They don't want to work. They always have an excuse why today's not a good day to go out and do it. Lazy people waste the very resources they've been given. In chapter 24 and verse 30, verse 31, I went by the field of the slothful and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding, and lo, it was all grown over with nettles, had covered the face thereof, and the stone was broken down. He said they benefit of what they've got because they won't take care. You know, that vineyard had the ability to grow grapes to take care of their needs. But he said that because of their laziness, needs to come in to break in and to destroy. So they're waste the very resources they've been given. And they're also in constant need. 32 and 34 of chapter 24, he said, Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. Yet a little slumber, a little folding sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. They're always in constant need and want because they've lost everything because they weren't willing to work for it. Now, as we transition here, verse 19 says that the wicked man's ways are nothing but trouble. And the next few verses reveal contrast. The wise see that first that the wise respect their parents in verses 20 through 21. A wise, glad father and despise. Folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom, but a man of understanding uprightly. So he said they respect their parents. Life principle number 54 says, 54 said, why? You know, in the 10 Commandments, there's 2 commandments given to children. Both of them are honor and obey. He said the only requisites to being a good child is to honor and obey. So a wise person gives respect to parents. A wise person plans out their work. 22, without counsel, appointed, established. So life principle number 55 says, always plan your work. Always plan your work, because in chapter 24 and verse 27, speaking on that same subject, he said this, he said, work without and make it fit for thyself in the field, and afterwards build thine house. So as he talks about it, he said that they're a person that plans out. They make sure they have the necessary to do the job and do it. They also want God. In verse 24, the way of life is above the way, that he may depart from hell beneath. So he said they want to live for God. Life principle number 6, wise people want to live for God. In fact, in the book of Colossians, let me go there real quick, Colossians chapter 3 and verses 1 through 3. He said, if ye then be risen with Christ, things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above and not on things of the earth, on the earth. For ye are dead, life is hid with Christ in God. He said, so you are to set your affection, set your love, set your therefore on the thing. Because a wise person, their parents, they plan their work, they want to live for God, but all carefully guard their mouth. In verse 28 of chapter 15, he said this, the heart of the righteous studieth to answer, but the mouth of the wicked evil things. That brings us to the last life principle in this section, number 57. Think before you speak. Before they speak. They're careful to regard what you could be the kind of person that does something. You can some of the times information. Some of the times you negotiations I've had, I was the one that gave up too much and realized I went, wow, well, I lost that. You know, this past Saturday I had an opportunity with a customer and we sat there and we were in a rush. I figured this person wasn't going to be interested in any warranty. You can quote it to them. They contact their bank, they get a loan, they're done. And then I realized I probably should have talked to him. So I talked to him about it, and they said, you know, I would have got that, man. I would have been interested in that. I already finished up talking with the bank, and I really don't want to call him back. And I go, stupid. Just hit myself up the head, and so that was my fault. I just steamrolled right through it. because I was someone who wasn't careful about I wasn't thinking through my process well enough. But I've had at times too where the customer said something, I go, ask them what you want for your bike on trade, and they tell you a number. I can do that. And you're sitting there thinking, man, if I'd had to negotiate with them, I'd have given them more. If you're not careful, you can give up and lose too much stuff before you speak. The book of Isaiah, in chapter 50, he talks kind of about this idea too. And let me go there real quick. In Isaiah chapter 50 and verse 4, beginning of verse 4, he said, "The Lord God hath given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him that is weary." Isaiah said, the Lord gave me the ability. He gave me the tongue that I should know what to say in the season that it's necessary. He said, you've got to learn to know what to say at the right time. There's plenty of people that haven't figured that out yet, haven't figured out how to control their thought process enough to learn when to say something and when it's not right to say something. I've worked with they're the kind of people that go when something makes them mad, control over them in their mind. But a wise person holds it in and keeps their peace and then discusses it afterwards. It's easy to live as a manager who lives by fear. You get mad at somebody, you yell at them. You get mad at somebody, you yell at them. That's how they live. Under those people before. And then I've also worked under people that when they get mad, they go sit and think about it for a minute, think it through, and then they come down and talk to you thoughtfully about it, about how they didn't like what you did. There's a huge difference for those two different people. There's a huge difference. We see that as we look at these different comparisons, again, taking the big back as he was comparing the wise to the foolish, the wicked to the righteous. And the fact is, we can be into really either category, being, again, the comparison between the saved and the unsaved. I wish I could say that this was the difference between being a Christian and not being a Christian, but it's not, because being a Christian still means we have the ability to and choose bad things. So we can still live the life of the be saved. We can still live the life of the wicked and still be saved. How do you do that? Well, you do it because you're being convicted. Spirit, you look back at the just man, but yet he did things that were very unjust. He lived in the city of Sodom when he should have been living outside with his uncle Abraham. He allowed his daughters and his family to marry into the world. Then he laid his daughters to get him drunk and sleep. He did all these things, but yet he was a righteous man, but he lived like a fool. So it's possible for us to be saved and live. So the question we have to ask, if our friends, even more importantly, if God were to categorize us, which side of this equation would He put us on? When we talk, the way we live, the things we live for, the way we think, which side of this balancing scale would we come out on? How does our life measure up? Are we living our lives in the characteristics of the wise? Are we living our lives in the characteristics of the fool? And that's really the whole point of the book of Proverbs, is which side, how are you living your life? Because again, being a Christian doesn't automatically place you in the category of the wise. I wish it did, because it would make me a lot better off if I could just, when you got saved, go, and you'll be wise from then on. Not always the case. I wish it was. Well, it is time for us to finish. It's time for the get ready for the preaching hour, so let's go ahead and let's pray. Lord, I do thank You for Your word. I thank You for the fact that in the book of Proverbs, plainly made it in front of our face what it means to walk as a godly person. Lord, You showed us that we're to have a careful guarding over, that we're to plan our actions, that we're not to be lazy, that we're supposed to be careful with the things we say to people, think before we talk. Lord, there's so many basic life principles that even if you're not a Christian, these would learn to live by. Lord, because they'll save us from a lot of heartache and a lot of pain and loss. I pray that You'd help us as we get ready to meet. Lord, keep our ready to worship You, and I pray that You'd bring in some guests this morning. In Your name I pray. Amen.